Hopefully everybody can see the slide set. Maybe, hopefully.
Yes.
Okay, well, let's get started then. Welcome everyone, and thank you for taking time out of your evening to participate in tonight's webinar. Most of you know me, but if you don't, I'm Chris Wenzel, the president of the LIAPG, and we have a really good talk tonight. So I'm going to go through a little business here and get right on to the main presentation. First of all, as we do every month, we like to thank our corporate sponsors, and there's two levels, Diamond and Topaz. Our Diamond level sponsors are Cascade Environmental, PW Grosser, and our Topaz level sponsors are Alpha Analytical, Envirotrack, ERM Consulting and Engineering, Island Pump and Tank, Regenesis, VHB, and York Analytical. If you're not familiar with any of these organizations, you can go to the LIAPG website, and there's a scrolling banner that shows everybody's logo, and you can actually click on that logo and it will redirect you to their website if you're interested in more about any of them. So we thank them very much, as well as our members, for keeping us going. And we'll move right on here. A couple of news items. My slides are not cooperating, but we'll keep trying here. We've had a really good year as far as our Zoom webinars monthly. They're usually the third Thursday of every month. And it looks like we're going to make it with 12 for 12, which is fantastic. You know, we're looking for January, February speakers already. And I will tell you that, you know, it's difficult finding speakers, and we would like to, you know, have a little better participation. And I know I went on the Central New York Association of Professional Geologists website, and I saw that last night that they actually have speakers booked through June. So, you know, we are always looking for help with this. And, you know, if you have something interesting that you've done in a presentation that maybe you already made, you know, reach out to us. We'd love to have you. We like to keep the subject matter diverse. We like to keep it, you know, academic, commercial, research, anything you got that is geologically, environmentally related. I think we're pretty much open to entertaining. So that's the appeal for that. Next month, the presentation is going to be on the 18th of November. The presentation is going to be made by Curdy Jackson of the National Park Service and Fire Island National Seashore on the wilderness breach, which is the breach in Fire Island that occurred during Superstorm Sandy and opened up a breach in the island and changed certainly the amount of water exchanges from Great South Bays between that and the ocean. In December, Gil Hansen, retired from Stony Brook, is going to put a presentation on for glacial tunnel valleys along the North Shore. So both of those, you should try and catch them. We hope to see you here. So, you know, like I said, if you have anything you can share with us, we'd love it. We had a field trip planned for this Saturday, led by Curdy Jackson, in advance of the field trip, actually, and we wanted to do it the other way, but there was no way to schedule it. But actually, with the weather and some other issues that have come up, unfortunately, we have to cancel it. We will send out an email notifying everybody that registered for it, and we will find another date and try and do it again somewhere between now and when the weather gets too cold to have a pleasant walk along Fire Island. So just keep that in mind, you know, try and come out. It would be nice to see people. The LIAPG is an open organization, as you've seen from our statements, and our board meets monthly. Right now it's online, and it's the first Monday of every month. So the next one is coming up on the 1st of November, and it's open to everyone. If anybody's interested in what we do or getting involved, interested in becoming a board member or a committee member and helping us out plan the 2022 events that we're thinking about, you know, reach out. You can email us. The contact information is on the LIAPG website, and we'll connect you with the link, and you're more than welcome to participate. Some other upcoming events from our sister organizations across the state and in Pennsylvania. Sorry about that. I don't know why he's not cooperating tonight.
That's okay. We're so used to nothing's not cooperating.
Whoever's not muted, could you mute yourself, please? And talking about the New York State Council of Professional Geologists, last month, the State Education Department approved the council to be providers of continuing education for geologists, for professional geologists in the state, which is a requirement if you have your PG license. And what that means is that the council will be the organization that reviews webinars and presentations and such, and approves them as appropriate content. And then they'll be facilitating those being put on a regional basis. So you will see, once we get into that mode in 2022, you will see LIAPG helping facilitate local events where you can attend. There'll also be online events. The other thing to talk about is that as of last year, there was a fundraiser that involved commissioning a batch of beer from Lithology Brewing in Farmingdale, and then it's going to be sold around the holidays, and you can order it online. It'll get shipped to you. This year's beer is going to be called Pleistocene Pilsner, best served cold. So when you see those announcements, I would encourage you, if you're a beer drinker and you like the beer that Lithology makes, consider making a purchase, because the profits go to helping the council keep themselves running. As far as the other organizations, the Buffalo Association of Professional Geologists, they didn't have anything on their website as of last night for the remainder of the year, but you should check in with them, because all of these organizations do these online webinars at this point, and you can usually pick up some interesting talks. As far as Central New York goes, as I mentioned, they're actually booked out through June, but the next one coming up on the 17th of November is Dave Eckhart, who's retired from the USGS. He was a groundwater guy. I actually had him as a professor at one point. The topic will be announced on the website. So, check it out. Same thing with Hudson Mohawk Professional Geologists Association and the Northeast chapter of the American Institute of Professional Geologists. And where is Jen? Jen, where are you? I'll see you now. A few more, and then we'll be finished. Pennsylvania has the Pennsylvania Council of Professional Geologists has a very robust program also. 16th of November, they've got a webinar on the geology and geomorph of the Youghiogany River and Laurel Highlands. In December, there's a hard rock presentation regarding petrology, geochemical, and structural analysis of ultramafics in southeastern PA. And then in June and April, they've got some longer courses, which are all-day courses. One's on bedrock aquifer characterization when it comes to hydrostructural methods, and another one on borehole geophysics with field demonstration. There are fees for these, but if you know someone who might benefit from attending these, you should check it out on their website. Easy to find, PCPG. And lastly, for those of you who might be on this call that are hoping to have your professional geologist license in the future, as you know, you need to take and pass both batteries of the ASBOG exam, and the next one is in March of 2022, and that deadline for the application is fast approaching, 15th of November. And then the next one after that, if you miss that, isn't until October of 2022, and your deadline is in June. So those who are interested, you can see the website right there, pretty easy to find. And with that, we will move to our main event. And the topic is fossil collecting in the New York metro region. And it's being presented by Dr. Bret Bennington. He's a professor of geology and chair of the Environment and Sustainability Department at Hofstra University. And we are always grateful to have Bret. He is a regular presenter with our organization and want to thank you. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Bret. I will mention that because this is a fossil site presentation, you'll see in the chat box, Bret put in there for everyone a link to a KMZ file, which you can use with like Google Earth, and it's a layer that you can import, and then it will identify on Google Earth the locations that he's discussing. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and let Bret start to share and make his presentation. So
yeah, I'm just going to ask, can somebody recopy that link in the chat? For those of us that came on late, we don't see it.
okay.
Thank you.
And Jen, you are now a co-host.
And can you make me a co-host too, please?
But I did, I'm sorry.
Nope.
Well, let's do that so that you can actually do your thing.
All right.
You should be now.
Yes, I am now a co-host. Let's see. Okay, now I have the awesome power to mute.
You do.
Yes.
That's why I'm also co-host, so I can mute some people too. So I'll try again before they get to you.
And stick around after the presentation. We do have some fossil paleontology trivia if you're interested in participating in the quiz.
Okay, let's see. Hold on one second here. All right, welcome everybody to the presentation today. As Chris said, I'm going to be kind of giving you a tour of some of my favorite fossil collecting places. And these are all localities that are accessible, with, you can go there in a day and come back. And again, the link that's in the chat room is a link to a KMZ file. If you follow that link, it should let you download the file. And then if you open the file in Google Earth, you will have push pin marks at all of the localities, so you can find them. All right, so let me share my screen here. Let's just go right into this. Okay, very good. And I'm gonna keep everybody muted, but if you have a question, do not hesitate to unmute yourself and ask the question. Questions usually, I think, work better if we kind of take them on the fly while they're still critical. Okay, so coming up on your screen here is a screenshot of Google Earth, and the idea is that I kind of drew a radius of about 150 miles from Hofstra University. And what I've got place marked in Google Earth are all of the fossil localities that I take students to. Well, I'm not going to talk about all of them. What I decided for this presentation is I would just talk about the ones that are particularly easy to access. They are particularly interesting, and you're highly likely to find or at least see really good fossils. And a lot of these places are also just really cool scenic places to visit. So if you haven't been to them before, you should consider going. And everything is kid friendly. So what's fossil collecting if you don't bring a kid or two or three along with you? And I'm just, let's pull up some geologic maps here. There we go. And basically, we're very lucky on Long Island in that we have within striking distance fossil localities that represent a pretty wide range of time periods. So on Long Island and in central New Jersey, we can visit strata from the Cretaceous, from the end of the Mesozoic, and collect fossils. We can head up into central Connecticut and up into Massachusetts, and we can see some world famous dinosaur fossils from the Triassic and late Triassic and early Jurassic. And then if we venture up through across the Hudson Highlands and up into the Hudson Valley and the Catskills, we can explore Paleozoic fossils, mostly from the Devonian period. And that's a pretty good range of time. So again, it's we're really fortunate to live in this place. So for our tour today, I'm going to start with Long Island and work my way outward. And we're kind of, instead of going up through time, which is typically geologists, we're always going up through time. We're going to kind of go back through time. So we're going to start at the Cretaceous and work our way down into the Paleozoic here. So in the New York region, there's a belt Cretaceous age sedimentary strata that comes up through central New Jersey and is present on Staten Island, and then ducks underneath Long Island and is almost all below sea level, except for a few spots along the North Shore where the advance of glaciers during the last ice age bulldozed up blocks of the Cretaceous coastal plain and kind of mixed it in with the glacial outwash above sea level. So where the subsurface of Long Island is being eroded into along the shoreline of western Long Island Sound on Long Island, you can get access to some of these layers, although they're not really in place, but nevertheless they're there. So in western Long Island, give it a second here to come up. There we go. There are Cretaceous exposures at Garvey's Point in Glen Cove, where the Garvey's Point, the Nassau County Garvey's Point Museum is. There are exposures of Cretaceous at Comset State Park and Lloyd Neck. Some exposures in Eaton's Neck, which actually I'm not that familiar with. I haven't really had a chance to explore them. And then there are Cretaceous clays that are coming kind of being extruded out from the cliffs along the shoreline around Mackinac Beach in Northport and along the beach by the Indian Hills Country Club. So let's see, I'm going to just jump into Google Earth real quick here. It's just being a little slow, so I have to give Zoom a second to catch up. All right, so this is a live Google Earth view. And if you open up that KMZ file at some point, what you will see in the left-hand menu is a whole series of links. And if you click on the Comset State Park link, you'll get a little dialog box that has a little bit of information. And then there's the dialog box, and then Google Earth will navigate to that location. So Comset State Park, if you've never been there, there's a parking area, and then the parking area is about 2 miles from the beach. So it's a little bit of a walk to work your way down the dirt road to get to the fishing access and get out onto the beach. You can also walk down past the mansion to get on the beach. But there's a whole section of shoreline here with cliffs that expose the Pleistocene and the Cretaceous sediments of Long Island. Whoops. Hold on, I got to get Keynote back here. There we go. Just wait for it to refresh. There we go. So, and one of the cool things about Comset is about halfway down the cliff exposure is a really large outcrop of Cretaceous age sands and clays from the Raritan Formation. And you would think this is where you would find fossils, but actually there don't seem to be any fossils coming out of this this sediment. Although I've got a student right now who's sieving out some samples and looking to see if there's anything small that people might have missed. Instead, where you find the fossils at Comset State Park, this is being really slow, I apologize. Come on. There we go. Where you find fossils at Comset State Park is in slabs of hematitic mudstone and siltstone that are just lying around on the beach. So fossil collecting is a beachcombing exercise. And I think that these are pieces of hematite cemented sediment from the Raritan Formation that got kind of, reworked by the advance of the glaciers and incorporated into the glacial till and the glacial outwash. So as the Pleistocene deposits erode and release the cobbles onto the beach, a component of the cobbles are these pieces of Raritan that have plant fossils. And so, the way you collect fossils at Comset is you just walk down the beach and inspect every piece of red flaggy siltstone that you can find. And you're looking for pieces that are very fine grained and look kind of smooth. And then if you look carefully, very often you will find, the most common fossils you'll find are just little bits and pieces of chopped up plant and maybe little chunks of wood, which is what's shown in the photo here. If you're fortunate, you might find some leaf impressions. There we go. So this is a slab that I found. I just happened to be on the beach late in the fall and leading a field trip, and the light was low, and so the sunlight kind of coming in at a low angle made these leaf impressions just kind of pop out. And I saw this piece lying in the sand about 15 feet away. So this is a really nice example of typical impression fossil, plant fossil from the Raritan Formation. I'll show you a couple of other fossils that have been found over years. There we go. This is it looks like a dogwood flower, but it's actually a little winged seed from a gymnosperm plant. And then this is a little tiny bit of fern that showed up in one of the slabs. And then on a couple of other visits to the beach recently, where I was working with some educators from state parks, one of the educators picked up this beautiful chunk of petrified wood. It's preserved as a hematite. The photo on the right shows the kind of the inside texture of the wood, and the photo on the left is the flip side of the specimen, which shows the bark on the outside. And then the third photo in the middle is a chunk of hematized driftwood. And I picked it up, and I picked it up because I recognized that this was a nice piece of hematite mineral, and put it in my pocket. And later on, when I looked at it closely, I realized that it was actually a small kind of partially rounded piece of wood. It has a kind of a blocky woody texture. And that's pretty much what you find you can find at Comset, and similar kinds of fossils can be found at Garvey's Point as well. There, in addition to the sands that I showed you a picture of a few minutes ago, at Garvey's Point, at Comset, and at Mackinac further east, there's a lot of clay which comes out along the shoreline, and the clay is apparently kind of being squeezed up from the subsurface by the weight of the cliffs, and it just kind of pops up on the beach, and sometimes after a storm, a bunch of it will be exposed. And it's certainly possible that there are pollen fossils in the clays, but there may be other fossils as well, and no one's ever found an actual dinosaur fossil on Long Island, except for a couple of footprints that have been found along the North Fork, but those aren't really Long Island dinosaur fossils. Those footprints got carried down from Connecticut. But it's certainly possible that there are some microvertebrate fossils or some teeth or something in these Cretaceous deposits. And I think that they haven't been found yet because nobody's really looked for them very hard. But they certainly could be there. Okay, so that's pretty much what Long Island has to offer in terms of fossil collecting. The only other fossils you're going to find on Long Island are fossils in pieces of limestone that have been brought down from the Hudson Valley by the glaciers, or that have been used by the highway department as riprap or as part of a jetty or something. If you want to find marine, Cretaceous fossils, then you need to head down to New Jersey. And in this diagram here, you can see that there's a belt of Cretaceous outcrop, which is basically where the western edge of the coastal plain is being cut into by erosion. And because the layers are tilted towards the mid-ocean ridge, erosion exposes the oldest layers farthest to the west. And there's a pretty good sequence of upper Cretaceous sediment there. But the deposits that are most fossiliferous are in the very latest part of the Cretaceous, kind of up here near the top of the pile, along the eastern edge of the Cretaceous outcrop belt. So the sediments on Long Island, or under Long Island, are the Raritan Formation and the Magathy Formation. These are, our two confined aquifers beneath the upper glacial aquifer, and they are from the beginning of the late Cretaceous, and the Raritan is near shore, mostly terrestrial. You get up towards the end of the late Cretaceous, and there's this formation called the Navesink Formation, which is an offshore formation, and it's very fossiliferous. And I'm going to jump back into Google Earth here. Whoops. Hold on 1 second. Just have to wait for the image to refresh. So if you cross the Verrazano Bridge and head across Staten Island, take the outer bridge crossing, and go south on the Garden State Parkway, there are two localities that are very accessible, easy to access. There's a Porosee Brook locality and the Big Brook locality. And the Porosee Brook locality is in an official fossil park. So it's accessible to the public. There's a convenient parking area. We zoom in. Come on. There we go. So there's a place to park. It's a very nice area. There's a park headquarters about a half a mile from where you actually access the stream to to find the fossils, that has some exhibits in it that's worth dropping in on. And then the other locality at Big Brook is just a couple miles away. And I'm just going to fly down to that so I can explain it to you. Just give, there we go. So Big Brook is a creek that crosses underneath a road called Boundary Road. And so if you make your way to where the place mark is, you will see that on the south side of the creek, there's a little pull-off area you can park. And then you just have to scramble down the embankment and get down into the creek. It's a very shallow creek. You can wade through it. Recommend wearing water shoes or hip waders, depending on how tolerant you are about getting wet. And once you're down in the creek, it's a very nice place. You often will run into other people who are collecting fossils, and there's a lot to see down in both of these creeks. So let me go back to the slides here. There we go. So what's exposed at Big Brook is a pretty thick sequence of sediments, and there's actually quite a bit of environmental change as you go up through the section from a shallower inner shelf environment to these green sands or glauconite deposits, which are outer shelf, probably deposited in 300 feet of water or so. The fossils are scattered throughout the sediments, but there are a couple of layers, concentrated shell beds. And the uppermost shell bed, which is full of fossil oysters of various species, is present right at stream level at Porosy Brook. So if you go to Porosy Brook, you can find a lot of shelly fossils, and you can see them poking out of the cliff right at stream level. Whereas at Big Brook, these fossils are kind of inaccessible. You have to rely on slumping and erosion to bring them down into the creek where you can find them. On the other hand, one of the highlights of Big Brook is shark tooth collecting, vertebrate fossil collecting. And a lot of that material is coming from the lower parts of the Navasink Formation. So the shark tooth collecting at Porosy Brook isn't so good because that material isn't exposed. It's much better at Big Brook. So here's a picture of some of my students over the summer. And so we just hiked along the creek and collected fossil oysters, just picked them up out of the stream and along the banks here. But in the background along the edge, you can see where somebody's chopped away at the embankment, and that's exposing the main shelly layer there. And the most common fossil that you find at Porosy Brook is this cup-shaped oyster called Pycnodonte. And one half of the shell is a cup, and the other shell is a lid on the cup. So these are oysters that were kind of different from modern oysters. They would just kind of sit in the mud, open up the lid, and filter feed. The cool thing about oysters, the Pycnodonte oysters that you find at Porosy Brook, is that they have color bands on them. So they preserve some of the original shell color, these kind of reddish stripes, which if you next time you have an appetizer of oysters on the half shell, inspect your oyster shells carefully, because you may find similar sort of thin purplish stripes that from the beak to the margin of the shell. So it's very unusual to see color preserved in fossils that are well, these are about 70 million years old. So that's a really kind of unique aspect of the fossils that you find at Porosy Brook. So Porosy Brook is, again, it's a beautiful place, and it's a fun place to collect fossils. But for my money, Big Brook is the best, because at Big Brook you can collect oyster fossils as well, but you can also sieve the stream gravels and look for vertebrate fossils. And it's very I mean, you can, if you spend a few hours, you can find some really cool fossils. One of the really interesting things is that in the layers that are right at stream level, if you look carefully, you will notice that these sediments are actually not very well layered at all, because they've been stirred around by things digging through them. And you will find lots and lots of burrows, particularly in the stream when you're sieving for shark teeth. You'll find lots and lots and lots of these tubular masses of cemented sediment, which are hematized burrows. And the burrows were being made by shrimp, by these burrowing shrimp called callianacid crustaceans. And the particular species is called Proto-Callianassa. And sometimes if you just kind of scan very carefully the side of the bank where the burrows are exposed, you will see like a shiny black mass of material, and that's sometimes a fossilized piece of one of the shrimp in its burrow. And then sieving the sediments, sometimes you'll find a claw, or this is a segment of the arm. This is a piece of the carapace here. They're not super common, but you can find these fossilized shrimp, which is interesting. And then there's another species of oyster that's similar to Pycnodonte, which is pretty easy to find at Big Brook, and that's Exogyra. It's a beautiful shell. It's called Exogyra costata because it has this costate pattern on the outside of the shell. And again, the one shell, or one valve of the shell, is kind of cup-shaped, and the other valve forms a sort of a spiral lid. And these oysters would just sit in the mud and pop open their lids to filter feed. Some of them get to be quite large. So this is a nice big one here. And that's the the cup side of the shell, and then if you flip it over, this particular one was completely intact, and it has the lid preserved as well. If you look carefully in the shells, that are in the stream, you can find these beautiful little plicated shells. These are brachiopods, Charistothyris. They're small, usually only about a centimeter in diameter, but they're beautiful, delicate little shells. And brachiopods are not something you usually find in the modern world. They were very common in the Paleozoic, but they were still around in the Mesozoic, and so it's not surprising that they're there. Along with the small brachiopods, there's one more species of oyster that you can find at Big Brook, which I call them potato chip oysters because they look like little ruffled potato chips. This is Agarostrea, and you'll find lots of these. There are lots of them in that shell bed, and they end up in the sediments. And then the last invertebrate fossil that's kind of interesting is this one. These are belemnites, and the belemnites seem to be very common, not in the shell beds, but in the sediments that are between the stream and the shell beds. Sometimes you can, if you just kind of scan the mud in the in the embankment, you will see these things that look like orange cigars kind of poking out of the mud. These are an internal shell from an extinct type of squid called a belemnite. These are called guards, and we think that they just sort of provided some counterweight to in the body of the squid. And they're very common as fossils. And again, if you're sieving the stream gravels, you'll find lots of pieces of these. And if you look very carefully along the embankment, you may be able to see a larger intact one that you can pry out of the sediment. And most people who go to Big Brook are going to look for shark teeth, and they really don't spend any time paying attention to the invertebrate fossils. But the shelly fossils are really cool, and it's worth just taking a hike down the stream for a few hundred yards and just looking for places where some of the sediment from up at the top has slumped down and brought with it a portion of the shell bed, and then you can find lots of really cool fossil oysters. And the preservation is remarkably good. These things were never buried very, very deep, so they weren't put under pressure. They're not encased in solid rock. They're encased in compacted sediments. It's easy to clean all the sediment off them. And when you're done, you have a shell that looks like something you might have found on the beach, but it's 70 million years old. That said, if you do bring a screen, a sieve box or a strainer or something down to Big Brook, you can sieve the stream gravels and look for vertebrate fossils, most commonly shark teeth, but there are other things in there as well. And it's easy enough to build a screen box. You just go get yourself some hardware cloth that's with a 1/2-inch mesh, and build a frame and tack the hardware cloth to the frame, and you've got a sieve. And it takes a little bit of patience. You fill the sieve with gravel, you swish it around in the water to get all the sand and mud out, and then you look and see what you can find. And if you're having a good day, maybe every sieve load you do, you might find 1 or 2 shark teeth. This is a bunch of fossils that we found, myself, a friend of mine, and his son. This is about 2 hours worth of work here. And again, most of these are shark teeth, but this piece in the upper left here is actually the tooth of a fish called Encodus. It's a tooth that grows right out of the jawbone. There's a fossil snail in the lower left there. And then there are a couple of other, this fossil, this right here is a tooth from a shell crushing fish. So there are, besides sharks, and there are a variety of shark teeth, and then different types of fish teeth. If you're having a really good day, you might find a large fish tooth. This is a big kind of dagger-like fang from a fish that was related to modern herring called Encodus. And then, if you're really lucky, you might find something like this. This is a tooth from a mosasaur. I didn't find this. Somebody else who was down in the creek found it, but he was very excited, and he went up and down the creek showing everybody, and he allowed me to take a picture of it. I have found mosasaur teeth. I just haven't found any this big. Sometimes, I've found some small ones. They're not common, but you never know. And here is the owner of that tooth. That's a mosasaur. Mosasaurs were basically swimming Komodo dragons. They're essentially monitor lizards that adapted for a completely aquatic existence, and they kind of took over after ichthyosaurs went extinct. It is possible, by the way, that one could find a dinosaur fossil at Big Brook or at Porosity Brook because the sediments are the right age. Dinosaurs are very rare, though. You can count on the fingers of one hand the number of dinosaur bones that have been found in the Navasink Formation over the last 150 years or so. The reason they're so rare is because these are offshore deposits, and dinosaurs were terrestrial animals. So they just, you know, unless a dinosaur died in a flood and got rafted out to sea and sank to the bottom, you wouldn't, you know, find a dinosaur fossils typically. That said, New Jersey is the place where the first nearly complete dinosaur fossil was found, and it was found in the same kinds of sediments as the Navasink Formation, just a formation that's a little bit older and one that was probably a little bit more near shore. If you want to indulge yourself in dinosaurs, though, then instead of going to New Jersey, you want to go to Connecticut. So you head I'm going to zoom out in Google Earth here. Give Zoom a chance to catch up.
Brett, while your Zoom is catching up, we had a comment from Rebecca Labarca. The mosasaurs only had one row of teeth.
Yeah, that's correct, Rebecca. They're unlike sharks, which have multiple rows of teeth, and actually a lot of dinosaurs, which have multiple rows of teeth. Mosasaurs are lizards, and lizards just have a single row of teeth. Great question. So if you hunger for dinosaurs, then cross the Throg's Neck and get on the Merritt Parkway and head for Hartford. And I would recommend you want to do a dinosaur day, then I would recommend stopping at the Yale Peabody Museum, which has one of the oldest and coolest dinosaur exhibits in the country. And then when you're done at the Yale Peabody Museum, head north on Interstate 91 and get off at the Rocky Hill exit, and a mile off of the exit, you can arrive at Dinosaur State Park, which is one of the gems of of paleontology in the eastern United States. If you've never been there, I highly recommend it. Basically, it's a site where back in the 70s they were getting ready to build a new Department of Motor Vehicle building. And when they were excavating the foundation, they uncovered hundreds, if not thousands, of dinosaur footprints, and fortunately decided to build their motor vehicle building somewhere else. They reburied most of the footprints to preserve them, protect them, and they built a building over the remaining portion of footprints and turned it into a museum. And it is one of the nicest small museums you will ever visit. And they have incredible specimens on display representing the dinosaur fossils of the Connecticut Valley, the Triassic-Jurassic Rift Basin that runs up through central Connecticut and into Massachusetts. And then, the main event is this bedding plane exposure with hundreds of large dinosaur trackways, pretty much all the same species of track. It's a track made by a large carnivorous dinosaur. The trackway is called Eubrontes. The inferred track maker is something like the dinosaur in the diorama, Dilophosaurus, which is known from the lower Jurassic of Arizona. So, this is, again, it's a spectacular museum. You can't collect fossils, obviously. However, if you go in the summertime and bring your own bag of plaster, you can cast your own dinosaur trackway. So they have negatives. They have dinosaur track impressions in blocks of rock that were excavated during the construction in a little courtyard area, and if you bring your own plaster and some vegetable oil, they have these sort of cake pan rings and towels, and you can make a plaster replica of one of the trackways and take it home for your very own, which is pretty cool. So here is a close-up of some of the trackways. They're also very good at, if you bring a group of college students there and tell them ahead of time that you're coming, they will let you go down onto the floor and look at the tracks up close and also make measurements of them. You can do like a lab exercise with your students in the museum, which is really nice. And then let me just jump back into Google Earth here. If you have time, continue north on Interstate 91, cross the Massachusetts border and head up to Holyoke, Massachusetts, and visit a place called Dinosaur Footprint Reservation. This is not a museum, it's really just a roadside attraction. It's a little pull-off. There's a parking area, there's a little kiosk, and then a trail that you can see in the Google Earth image here. There we go. Just going to zoom in a little bit. Come on, there we go. A little bit more, you can do it. Well, you can see, so you, right, there we go. So you just walk down a little path, and there's a bunch of rock exposed down off of the down the slope off of the highway here, and there are lots and lots of dinosaur trackways in that bedding plane exposure. And then you can cross the railroad tracks very carefully because this is an active line. And across the railroad tracks along the Connecticut River is lots of bedding plane exposure of the Portland Formation. And if you look carefully, you can find lots of impressions of wood, driftwood that was washing up along the banks of the lake that deposited the Portland Formation. And then you can also find some trackways here. You're not really allowed to collect anything. We want to save the trackways for other people to look at. But it's just an amazing place to take kids or to take students to see. So when I teach my course on dinosaurs, I bring my students here and we measure the trackways so we can calculate how fast the dinosaurs were moving when they left the tracks behind. And you can see multiple kinds of dinosaurs. So there are the large clawed tracks made by eubrontes. There are some smaller tracks made by herbivorous dinosaurs. There are many examples of a smaller theropod dinosaur track called Growlator, which was made by something like Coelophysis, a dinosaur probably no bigger than a person. So just within that area, quite a variety of dinosaurs to look at. Well worth the trip. And here's a view along the river. And you just have to walk along the rock and look carefully again. you know, if you can end up here later in the day when the sun is low, it helps you see the tracks. Here's a three-toed growlator track that I just dabbed a little water on to make it pop out. This one's nice because it has a very, very good claw impression at the end of the middle toe there. Okay, so that's the Mesozoic. And let me zoom out here. So the last part of the tour is the Paleozoic. And for the Paleozoic, you want to head up the New York State Thruway or the Taconic Parkway, and then get up into the Hudson Valley here. And I've got a bunch of localities place marked in the Google Earth file. These are all interesting and accessible places, but I'm just going to focus in on 4 of them that can be done in a single day to make for a nice fossil collecting trip. So we're going to visit the Glenary Limestone locality, and then we're going to head up almost to Albany to John Boyd Thatcher State Park and talk about what you can see in the park, and then a couple of localities that are just a couple miles outside of John Boyd Thatcher. Oh, and I'm sorry, I forgot. Also going to mention one place in the Catskills. A little detour up into the Catskill Mountains. So in terms of the stratigraphy and where we are in time, John Boyd Thatcher State Park, you have the lower Devonian limestones of the Helderberg group. And then in the further south, in the vicinity of Kingston, New York, are good exposures of the Glenary Limestone, which is a little bit younger than the Helderbergs. And then up near John Boyd Thatcher, we'll visit an Onondaga Limestone locality. And the Onondaga Limestone is it's the last formation of it's the youngest limestone formation before everything changes over in New York State to clastic deposition, mudstones and siltstones and greywackes and shales and sandstones. And then a detour up into the Catskills to talk about the fossils at Gilboa, New York here. So this locality at Glenary is, I think, deserves to be considered one of the best fossil localities in New York State. I just discovered it for myself a year ago or so. So it's on 9W, just north of Kingston. It's a busy road, so you do have to be careful, but there's a nice wide median, a couple of pull-off areas where you can comfortably park, and about a mile of outcrop. And what's exposed here is the Glenary Limestone. And the Glenary Limestone is incredibly fossiliferous. It is in most places along this road cut just a hash of shells. And what makes it particularly nice for fossil collecting is the shells are silicified. So as the limestone weathers, the shells don't weather. The shells pop out and eventually will come out completely, and you can collect them. So there's kind of 2 approaches here. The first approach is find big blocks of limestone with lots and lots of shells etched out and throw them in the back of your car and take them home and landscape with them. This big long chunk here, which almost couldn't get in the car, that ended up at Hofstra just outside of my building. It's a beautiful showpiece. It's just completely covered in big brachiopods. These other pieces ended up in my backyard. So that's one approach. Just get some nice big chunks full of shells. But I think the best collecting is if you simply take some time, sit down, and dig around in the dirt that's left behind after the limestone weathers. So at the top or along the shelves of the outcrop, if you scrounge around and in the dirt or just look at the surface of the mud where it's been washed by rainwater, you can pick up these beautiful specimens of Solicified Brachiopod. These just perfect little delicate shells that are, in some cases completely free of limestone. So they've just weathered out because the calcium carbonate in the fossil has been replaced by silica. Here are some specimens that I collected and brought back and just cleaned with soap and water. These are whole brachiopods, both valves intact, all the detail of the shell preserved, and just magnificent specimens. The most common brachiopod in the Glenary is this big kind of wrinkly looking spiriferid brachiopod called acrospirifer, and there are layers of the limestone it's just a hash of intact and partially intact and broken pieces of acrospirifer. And then also, if you look very carefully and dig around in the mud, you can find some nice snail shells. These are Platy Stoma. They're kind of big, almost look like the size of aquarium snails. So that's, if you've never stopped at that road cut, next time you're up in the Hudson Valley, you have to stop. It'll blow your mind. If you do find yourself up in the Catskills, it's a little bit of a detour to go from the Hudson Valley up into the Catskills, but it's certainly a beautiful trip. Make your way to Gilboa, New York. Gilboa is a little tiny town at the near the dam for the Schoharie Reservoir, and there is a brand new building, a small building which houses the Gilboa Museum and the Gilboa Historical Society. And they have a beautiful display outside of Devonian, upper Devonian or late Devonian plant fossils. These are tree stumps that were excavated when they were building the dam back in, I think, in the 1920s or 1930s maybe. Unfortunately, when they constructed the dam, they uncovered the oldest fossil forest that's ever been found. And unfortunately, the fossil site is now under the reservoir. It was briefly exposed during the last major drought in upstate New York, and paleontologists rushed in and did a bunch of new collecting and new work before the reservoir refilled again. But there's just a magnificent display of these large stumps outside of the museum, along with other fossils, other types of plant fossils from the Catskills. Yeah, so I guess the fossils on display outside were found in 2010 during a reconstruction project. And these are 380 million years old. The name given to the stumps is Eospermopterus, although they eventually found some fossils that allowed them to connect foliage, which had been given a separate name to the trunks. So the tree trunks are now they now go by the name of the foliage, which is the name of the actual tree. So outside of the museum, they have fossils on display, and then inside the museum, they have a very nice display of mostly New York State fossils, mostly from the Devonian. Just a couple of other pictures here. There's a reconstruction, and then on the right here are some of the branches from these trees, and then on the left here, this is actually the bottom of a stump. It's the underside of a stump, and you can see that these trees had a sort of a spiral array of roots that radiated out from the trunk. So again, Gilboa is certainly worth a stop if you're next time you're up in the Catskills. All right, now we're gonna head as far north as we're gonna get, and up to John Boyd Thatcher State Park. And John Boyd Thatcher State Park sits up on top of a cliff line called the Helderberg Escarpment, and this is basically the erosional front along the northern edge of the Catskills. You have the Lake Albany plain, Albany, New York, off to the right of the photo. Off in the distance, you have the foothills of the Adirondacks, and just this spectacular cliff line, which is there because you have these very hard limestones that are sitting on top of a big thick pile of older shale, and so the limestones resist erosion a bit better than the shale and form a steep cliff. And the park is along the top of the cliff. Absolutely spectacular scenery, particularly in the fall, but I recommend going there anytime. There is a state campground called Thompson Lake Campground, just a mile and a half outside of the park, which is a fun place to stay. There's a nature center at the campground where they have this beautiful diorama showing the park and the Helderberg Escarpment. And then they just built a brand new nature center in the park itself. At the foot or at the head of what's called the Indian Ladder Trail. And they have some very nice exhibits, very nice fossils in both of the nature centers. But the real highlight of John Boyd Thatcher is the Indian Ladder Trail hike, which takes you down the cliff, along the base of the cliff, and then back up again. And it's some of the most interesting and scenic geology in New York State. Lots of waterfalls coming over the cliff, which is nice, and the trail actually goes under the waterfalls. I was there with students back in September, and we were lucky enough to have an absolutely gorgeous day. Right about 24 hours after they had 3 inches of rain. So the waterfalls were just cranking, and it was really, really impressive. So the layers of limestone that are exposed in the cliff form what are called the Helderberg Limestones. And that's mostly the Manlius Formation and the Queemans Formation, which I'll show you some pictures of. And then on top, and set back to the west a little bit from the cliff, is the New Scotland Formation, which is a really, really fossiliferous shaly limestone. So all three of these formations are accessible in John Boyd Thatcher State Park. This is a view coming up on the screen here. From the top, looking down towards the base of the cliff. So the slopes that head down into the valley are composed of late Ordovician age graywackies and shales. They're called the Schenectady beds. They're not very accessible, and they're also not very fossiliferous. You might be able to find some graptolites if you were lucky, but the limestones have most of the fossils. You can see in the photo here, the trail at the base of the cliff follows essentially the base of the limestones. So there's a bunch of metal stairways that you walk down to get down to the base of the cliff, and you hike along the base of the cliff, and then some metal stairways to get back up to the top. Here's a view of the shale beds, the Ordovician beds down in the valley there. Again, these are not accessible. And then the view from along the trail. So there's a little bit of late Silurian, what's the Rondout Formation, which has these caves in it at the base, and then this big, thick, very, very well bedded limestone called the Manlius, and then a much more massive kind of poorly bedded limestone above all the way to the top, which is the Quemens Formation. And these limestone formations represent different environments that developed across New York State back in the Devonian as sea level rose and fell. So the lowest formation, the Rondout, is a supratidal carbonate mudflat environment. The Manlius Formation is kind of an intertidal environment, was flooded during high tides, probably exposed during low tides. And then the Quemens is a shallow water, like a reef environment. You know, subtidal, flooded all the time, but in very shallow water, lots of wave activity. And then the New Scotland Formation is a deeper water, muddier environment. So not really deep, still probably within the photic zone, but quieter water and some influx of clay, mud, settling out on the bottom and mixing with the carbonate mud. The Manlius, because it was deposited in a tidal flat environment, is very finely layered and not very fossiliferous, although in the lower part of the Manlius, you can find slabs of limestone that are absolutely covered with these little ice cream cone shaped fossils, very, tiny little things, which are called tentaculidids. And we don't really know what they are. It used to be thought that they were some kind of mollusk, but current thinking is that they may be more closely related to brachiopods. But whatever they were very happy in this high stress tidal flat environment. And so you find bedding plains that are just absolutely covered with tentaculidids. And it's kind of a sort of a showcase fossil for the Manlius Formation. And about halfway along the trail at the base of the cliff, there's an indentation in the cliff line where there's a waterfall falling down overhead, and lots of pieces of Manlius that have sloughed off of the roof here that are covered in those tentaculited fossils. So I've never not been able to just pick up a slab of rock and find tentaculites to show the students. There's my current crop of happy students there. As you climb back up the stairs to get back to the top of the cliff, you look very carefully at the limestone and you will see a change from this very well layered limestone to a limestone that has lots of pieces of shell weathering out of it. And this is the Quemens Formation. This is the shallow water kind of reef environment. Lots and lots of crinoid stems, very common fossil, very thick shelled brachiopods. The best way to collect Quemens fossils is to just go up to the top of the cliff and again, just dig around in the dirt that's weathered out of the limestone. It's impossible to chisel fossils out of hard limestone. It just doesn't work. But if you let Mother Nature do her thing and slowly etch the fossils out, they just end up in the sitting on the top, and you can easily collect them. My favorite place, though, in John Boyd Thatcher, is across the road from the Indian Ladder Trail, towards away from the cliff. There's a parking area called the Paint Mine parking area, Paint Mine area of the park, and there's a creek that runs through the, past the parking area and then across the road and over the escarpment. If you walk up that creek, don't take the trail. The trail goes above the creek. Just walk along the edge of the creek. The creek was very high when this picture here was taken, so we were kind of just barely keeping our feet dry. But normally there's plenty of room to walk. All of the rock exposed in the side of the cliff here is the New Scotland Formation. And about a quarter mile up the creek from the parking area, you come to this beautiful waterfall. Beautiful little waterfall, and there's lots of exposure. And all you have to do is just start sort of poking around in this shaly limestone, and you can find some really, really nice fossils. Here's pictures I took in the field on that field trip. After 5 minutes of just prying some of the shale and peeling it apart and looking through it, had some beautiful specimens of whole Devonian brachiopods of several different species here. And here's a couple specimens after I brought them back to the lab and cleaned them up a little bit. So there's a big spiriferid brachiopod called Macropleura. There's this very distinctive shell with these very wavy sort of growth lines. That's called Leptana. And then these smooth shelled brachiopods with a little indentation called Meristella. And you can collect some beautiful specimens. So that's one of my favorite spots there. And I should mention that you're technically, I guess, not supposed to collect anything from a state park, but nobody objects to anybody collecting shells from the beach, and fossils that are just sitting in the dirt. If they're along the beach, they're going to get washed away, and anywhere else they're they're just gonna weather away. And at John Boyd Thatcher, I had students there one day, and we couldn't walk the Indian Ladder Trail because they had it closed for some repairs. And I asked them, well, where else can I go? And the people in the park said, oh, well, you can go collect fossils if you walk down that trail. So, I don't think it's such a big deal. And on that note, Olivia has a question in the chat. It says, Professor Bennington, can you provide some guidance on how to search for and possibly collect fossils without harming the integrity of the surroundings? Perhaps you can share some resources to provide some direction. Some of the common sites for geology field trips have been worn away by overzealous visitors and have lost much of their initial quality and educational purpose. How should we approach fossil hunting to minimize destruction of the surrounding spaces? That's a great question, and I think the answer is to not hammer away at things. The best way to collect fossils is to just look very carefully at what erosion has released from the rock for you, and you can pick things up. If anything that needs to be hammered at to get it out, you're probably just going to destroy it, and it's probably best left in place so that other people can look at it. So that's kind of my approach. Is that if it's a fossil that's going to be weathered away anyway, in a short period of time, washed away by the stream or whatever, then what's the harm in picking it up? But if you bang away at a footprint trying to get it out of the rock, you're not going to get it out of the rock, and you're just going to destroy it, and then nobody else is going to be able to look at it. So, I think there's a good element of common sense. So leave the hammer at home. Well, the nice thing, I like to have my hammer with me, but I have my hammer is a masonry hammer, which means it had the back end of it is a flat blade, like kind of like a wide chisel. And so I don't use the front end of the hammer much at all. I use the back end of the hammer just to pry, just to wiggle loose pieces of shale, or to pick up a piece of shale, rock that's lying on the ground and split it. So that hammers are useful, but try and avoid just banging away at the rock. And I'm always lecturing my students on this. You're not going to get anywhere hammering away at a fossil. You're just going to destroy it. Okay, so just a couple more spots to look at real quick. Not far from John Boyd Thatcher State Park is an exposure of the Onondaga Formation, which is the last limestone formation of the Devonian before New York State just becomes covered by mud and sand eroding off of the rising Acadian Mountains to the east. And the Onondaga Formation is a spectacular limestone because it's essentially a coral reef. It's a Devonian coral reef, and again, this particular locality is just a public property along the creek. You can park on the side of the road and kind of scramble down the slope to get to it. And this is a good example of a place where you have to apply that common sense dictum. And this is rock hard limestone, and it's got some beautiful fossils in it. But if the fossils are embedded in that limestone, you're not going to get them out. You might be able to pry away a block and take that with you. And I don't see the harm in that, because if you can pry a block of rock off from the rest of the rock, that means that the next time that river floods, that block of rock is going to get taken away anyway. But if there's a nice coral head embedded in the limestone, hammering away at it isn't going to do anything except make it so that the next person can't look at it. So what my students are doing here is trying to just pry off a piece of the rock here, which is loose, which again, I don't see a harm in that. Here's an example of a beautiful coral head. This is a tabulate coral head, Favosites, which is firmly embedded in the limestone, and there's no sense in trying to remove it. This photo does illustrate the other function that hammers have, photo scale. So if you put your hammer down in the picture, you know how big the object is that you took a picture of. So the Onondaga Formation is just loaded with coral heads like this that are weathering, etching out of the rest of the limestone, and you can see the details of the coral and get some really nice pictures. There's also a lot of sea lily crinoid material. In between the coral heads, the sediment in many places is just gazillions of broken pieces of crinoid stems. And some of the stems are quite large. So these were very, very large crinoids. Probably would never find an intact one because this was a very high energy environment. And a crinoid, if as soon as it died and fell over, the waves would have just scattered it and broken it up into its component pieces. And last but not least, not far from the Onondaga locality, just up the hill from the little town of Schoharie. So at the end of the day, before you head into Schoharie and get something to eat, there's a couple of, there's one wonderful little restaurant in Schoharie. It's a beautiful little town. At the top of the hill is an exposure of the Beecraft Limestone. And the Beecraft Limestone is kind of like the Queemans Limestone. It's a shallow water near shore limestone that's just made up of broken pieces of fossil. And it's a good play again, well, here you can hammer away if you want, because this is actually part of an old limestone quarry. So, I mean, there's not much damage you can do. But again, the best fossil collecting is done not on the outcrop face, but just over in the dirt where the limestone has had a chance to weather and release whatever fossils it's holding. So, very solid limestone made up of broken pieces of fossil on the left here. And then in the outcrop along the face of the wall, you can find some coral heads embedded in the limestone. But the best collecting is just you just sit down in the dirt and start picking through the little pieces of gravel left behind, and you can find some lovely specimens of brachiopods. And occasionally a snail, maybe a piece of crinoid or something. All right, so get out there and find some fossils. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer questions. And I'm going to post in the chat one more time the link to the KMZ file that has all these localities place marked in it, so you can find them. If nobody has questions, then I'll turn it over to Chris, and he can start the trivia game.
Hey, Brett, I had one question, actually. When you were talking about ComSet and the hematitic red slabs on the beach, I always thought that those were red rocks coming from the Connecticut River Valley, from the Triassic red beds. But you were talking about them, you think they're falling out of the Cretaceous deposits there, huh?
Yeah, I do. I mean, there is Connecticut Valley material, but ComSet's a little bit too far west for it. If you head east and get out past Stony Brook, then you start to see boulders of Connecticut Valley rock,
Mm-hmm.
on the beach. But I just think ComSet's just too far west to have picked up any material from there.
Okay, great answer. I'm going to go back and look at it again with a different perspective.
And it does the Connecticut Valley stuff. It tends to be sandstones and arkoses, and I don't think a flaggy shaly rock would survive the trip across Long Island Sound. In the glacier as well.
Okay, fair enough. Anybody else have some questions that they want to engage?
And also, Chris, those leaves are from flowering plants. They don't belong. They got no business in the Triassic.
Well, that's a really good point. Yeah. Okay.
The fossils tell you they can't be Connecticut Valley. That's
Okay.
Probably the best answer.
Anybody else have any questions, comments, thoughts?
Well, Dr. Bennington, that was a fantastic field trip you took us on. 30 years ago, I did some work up in the Onondaga, and it really brought back some great memories.
Yeah, the Onondaga stretches all the way across the state, and
Yeah.
It's amazing everywhere I've seen it.
Yeah, we worked on a series of the patch reefs within the Onondaga, going from the Albany area and then across into the Buffalo area. It's great formation.
Well, all right. And I'll echo that comment, Brett. Thank you so much. That was a very entertaining presentation.
I was gonna put add one point to that. If you were ever up in the area, if you can get access to Jamesville Quarry, it's an open pit quarry mine, and they've got great exposures in there. They've recently started letting professional geologists in if you give them a heads up and stuff. And they're little worry about the general public, but if you're from a university and you've got a class of students, they're willing to work with you if you give them some heads up. So I just wanted to add that.
What was the name again?
It's Jamesville Quarry. It's owned by the Hanson Corporation. So if you would like their contact information, I'd be happy to send it to you.
Sure, that would be great. Thanks.
All right, you're welcome.
I'll put my email in the chat. What was the location roughly?
Oh, for the Jamesville Quarry?
Yeah.
It's in Jamesville, New York. It's just southeast of Syracuse.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's like spitting distance of downtown Syracuse almost.
Thanks.
Cool. Well, all right. Brett, like I was saying, awesome presentation. Thank you.
My pleasure.
As always, you're a star, and we appreciate it. With that, I guess what we should do is move into our quiz for tonight. We've got 10 questions plus a bonus, and it looks like I'm your host, so I'll do the best I can, and let's see how this goes. So question number 1, I'm going to launch, and hopefully you can see it. Should be coming up. And the first question is, which one of the following constitutes a fossil? A mineralized burrow of an extinct animal. B, an unidentified animal found frozen in a glacier. C, an ant found inside a block of amber dating back to, oh, sorry, whoops. Didn't mean to do that. 110 million years. And D, all of the above. Give you a minute to answer. And of course, there's no shame in participating. These are all anonymous. Set them up that way. We've got 25 participants. Looks like we've got some folks still answering. So we'll wait. These are all paleontological questions tonight. Okay, just another minute here. We've got 19 folks answered. Going once, going twice. All right. And the results are, we had 19 people answer, 17 of them said all of the above. One person said C and one person said A. The correct answer is D, all of the above.
Wouldn't A be a trace fossil, though, not really the remains of something that was living?
Still a fossil.
Still a fossil. Just
Well,
like
a footprint's a fossil too, but a footprint was never living.
But it's still, but trace fossils are considered fossils.
Okay.
Right. Okay, let's go to the next one. And question number 2. Well, if I can get there. I'm new at this part, sorry. Exit, edit. Come on.
I think I got it. Can you see it, Chris?
No. I can't see it because I'm a host. Ah, there it goes. Okay. Question number 2. Stephen Jay Gould is a paleontologist who speculated that of all the organisms that ever lived on Earth, only what percent are still alive? A, 1%, B, 20%, C, 50%, D, 90%. That's still alive, not gone. So we've got folks answering. We've got 20 of 25 people. 21, we're still going. Good engagement here. Okay. Anybody else? Looks like we've got 21 folks answered. And guess what? Here are the results. We had 17 of 21 said number 1, and 4 folks said B, 20. And the correct answer is 1%. Mass extinctions have occurred multiple times, and there's a whole lot of life left behind in fossils that is not wandering around today. So, good work. Okay, let's see. We can get to question number 3.
All right, I just launched number 3. Can you see it?
Yeah, I don't know why I'm having a hard time getting it to launch.
I'll next time I'll just keep going to the next one for you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, question number 3. Which of the following statements hold true for fossilization? A, only small animals are more likely to become fossils. B, fossilization is more likely to occur on mountains rather than forests. C, every organism that dies becomes a fossil. Or D, none of the above. Could be a trick question. We got 19 folks have answered so far. We're at about a minute. Anybody else gonna log an answer? Well, there's one more. Okay. All right, time's up. And here are the results. Looks like we had a overwhelming majority pick D, none of the above, and that is correct. Okay, so let's see if we can get. Thank you, Jen. Question number 4. An animal is more likely to become fossilized if A, left exposed to the elements, B, the animal dies at sea and sinks deep, C, the animal is soft-bodied, a soft-bodied animal like jellyfish, or D, all of the above. Now, I will tell you there are fossilized jellyfish, but they are rare. That's why I wore my jellyfish shirt tonight.
You just made it easier for us to guess one of the one of the answers is not correct.
Oh, that's not true. Rare, but still fossilized. I have one.
I saw one spray painted on the side of a building yesterday.
All right, we're at a minute and 15. Looks like 18 folks logged an answer. And The results show that we have a majority picking answer B, which is correct. Animal dies at sea and sinks deep, where it can be buried in a quiescent environment without a lot of high energy. Okay. Next question. Question 5. Which of the following statements is true? A, groundwater percolation can hinder mineralization of bone. B, bones usually contain organic as well as inorganic molecules. C, jellyfish can become fossils as their body contains hard parts. Or D, none of the above. The answers are coming in fast and furious now. All right. We're at about 1:15 here. Anyone else? Last call. Okay. We're going to close that and we're going to share the results. And you'll see there's a little more of a difference of opinion here tonight on this one. The correct answer for question 5 is actually B, in that bones contain organic material as well as inorganic molecules, in particular DNA. Okay, moving on to number 6. Question 6. Which of the following can be inferred from studying the fossilized skeletons of animals? A, pathologies. B, life expectancy. C, growth pattern. Or D, all of the above. Sorry for the lack of sound bed that's appropriate for answering questions, but we just haven't quite got that down as to what we could do, because the Jeopardy music, you can't find a good sound bed for it. And we're just coming up on 1:15. It looks like we've got 20 of 24 folks have logged an answer. It's pretty solid. All right, we're going to shut that off. And we're going to share the results, and the overwhelming majority picked D of all the above, which is the correct answer. All right. Number 7. Question 7. Paleoanthropology is the study of blank. A, fossils of early birds and their ancestors. B, fossils of early humans and their ancestors. C, fossils of early fish and its descendants. And D, fossils of early reptiles and its descendants. Okay, we're up to 19 of 24. That was quick. Anybody else want to log an answer? Oh, there goes 20. Okay. 21. Ooh, everybody's jumping in. All right, we're coming up on a minute and 15 seconds. I think we'll cut her here and see if we have a unanimous answer. And B is the correct answer. Fossils of early humans and their ancestors. That wasn't too hard. See if we can make them a little harder going forward. Okay. Question 8. Holotype is a blank. A single physical example of an organism known to have been used when the species was described. B, a term used to describe special type of bones found exclusively in birds. C, a recently formed fossil specimen. Or D, none of the above. And we're coming up on a minute and 15 seconds. And we've got 20 of 24 answers. Anybody else? All right. Let's see what we got here. Okay. So, overwhelming, the answer is A, a single physical example of an organism known to have been used when the species was described. Very good. This group has a pretty strong command of paleontology vocabulary. All right, coming down the pike, question 9. Radiocarbon dating can help find the age range of biological specimens no older than A, 50,000 years, B, 100,000 years, C, 500,000 years, and D, 1 million years. This one you have to think back real hard to what is the half-life, carbon-14. And we're coming up on a minute and 15. We've got 21 of 24 answers. And we're going to cut you off right here. And here are the results. The answer is A. Nice job, folks. The half-life of carbon-14, as we're talking about radiocarbon dating, is 5,730 years. So you can see over 50,000 years, you would have quite a few half-lives experienced during that time period, and the concentration would diminish. Okay, question number 10. The scientific study of the structure of bone skeletal elements and microbone morphology is called A, osteology, B, herpetology, C, entomology, or D, none of the above. Okay, 19 and 24. We're doing good. We're doing good. 21 and 24. Awesome. We're just approaching the minute and 15 seconds. So we're going to cut you off there because it looks like we've got everybody who's playing the game. And survey says 17 of 21 picked the correct answer, and it's osteology. Herpetology is turtles? No, I don't know. Anyway, one more question, the bonus question. And it is Terataspis, Phacops, and Triarthris are all species of, are they ammonids? Ammonoids, excuse me, gastropods, trilobites, or brachiopods?
And Olivia has chimed in. Herpetology is the study of reptiles and amphibians.
Oh, darn, right.
And Brett also chimed in with the same.
All right, we're up to 15, folks. 23 remaining. Looks like we're at 17. We're at a minute and 15 seconds. Anybody else want to take a guess? 18, okay. All right. And most of you got it right. They are all trilobites. And if you were to go find your old invertebrate fossils books, you would find some of the illustrations of Terataspis in particular are really ornate trilobite. Very cool critter. So thank you for participating. That was really good. Really good. You folks know your answers and with the quiz. I thought that was a great presentation, and this was a really good evening. Good content. So again, thank you, Brett, and thank you everyone for coming out and participating. And we hope that we see you next month and in December also. So thanks and good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was very informative. Thank you.
You're welcome.